When you look in the mirror, who do you see? Today, we're going to help you discover how God sees you and unpack the truth that God sees in you as we go through Michael Thompson's new book, King Me. You'll walk away with a new understanding of your journey through manhood and how God has made you to be a king. Men in the Arena Army, we salute you. Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the Men in the Arena podcast. I'm Jim Ramos, your host and guide, leading you to your best version in the stress bubble of life and beyond. Hey guys, I'm super excited to bring our guest on today, Michael Thompson. Michael and I go way back to his first book, The Heart of a Warrior, so you can listen to that podcast at your convenience. Michael lives in North Carolina with his beautiful wife, Robin, of the past 34 years, so he's got me by 2 years. Michael and Robin founded Zoe, and God continues to bless their work as they seek God's kingdom. He's the author of The Heart of a Warrior and King Me, which is our topic today. He's written other books as well. Michael and Robin live, work, and play to see the hearts set free through experiencing the transforming love of God. And I'm excited to have Michael on. How you doing, brother?
Good to be with you again, Jim. I'm good. I'm doing well. I was looking forward to this afternoon.
Yeah, you're 3 hours ahead of me. That's right. I forgot about that. It's barely noon. It's not even noon here. It's 11. So, man, I'm excited. I read your book cover to cover. Looking forward to getting in here and having a conversation. But let's start first with you. Tell our guys a little bit more about you and your story.
I grew up in church, if we go all the way back there. So, along the way, I think a lot of us who have suffered that fate become, Pharisaical, or we just kind of fall away. Well, I went the Pharisaical route. Joined the ranks of Campus Crusade after college with Athletes in Action. Played a few years on the AIA basketball team back in the, I'm glad to say it was at the transition of shorts being longer and socks being shorter. So, but I do have high school pictures of, wearing diapers as we played and socks up to our knees, and you had to make sure they were that way. But so then I went on to the Duke University campus as an Athletes in Action rep and worked there. Loved it. 17 years. Bounced into, or really God got me with Wild at Heart, as he did a lot of men of my generation. I was about 38. I'm 59 now. So what was that, 2000? Yeah, right in that space. And felt like, it was a beginning of a real trajectory turn for me, and led to my wife and I leaving staff about 5-6 years later. Not because we were unhappy, but because we were on a different path, working with men, particularly in marriages. I was back in school, got a biblical counseling degree, and practiced some of that for a while, but, just found myself more like a medic, in the battlefield, and more of a free agent than I was, wasn't using Campus Crusade stuff, was more moving in guys' lives with, matters of the heart, looking at their story, their history, their desires, and trying to, learn myself as we went along, tending to, a lot of the Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill. We kind of became the Wild at Heart guys, I think, here for a while, but started Zoe in 2005, Greek word for life. When Jesus talks about you might have life and have it to the full, it's the word Zoe. Found out that C.S. Lewis stole my stuff. He wrote about it. He wrote about it in Mere Christianity. And so that was fun. But that's what we get to do. I feel like we, are somewhere on that frontline space where a lot of people are hurt, and a lot of people are looking for a place to belong, and kind of taking Christianity beyond some of those fundamentals, spaces that we were all, who went to church for so long, well trained in, and into some spaces that are much deeper, than sin less, try harder, give more. And there's just, it's complicated, and the kingdom's very, very expansive in many, many ways in terms of how it works and who you are in it, and the enemy that has come to steal, kill, and destroy, as Jesus says. So, yeah, man, that's just a bit of the what we find ourselves doing day to day.
It's so interesting. First of all, I have a picture on my computer of my freshman basketball team, and I don't think those shorts could have got any higher, or or any higher up, and the socks any
Yeah,
higher. And I've got the
yeah.
same picture. So it's interesting. So Wild at Heart, I read that book when it first came out in '01. It just deeply impacted me. But it's funny how it impacted me. It seems like the second half of the book impacted you more than the first half. The first half really impacted me, and I didn't resonate with the second half. And so it's really
Mm,
fun, the perspective that you and I bring to
hmm.
men's ministry. You bring kind of that second half, the brokenness, the woundedness, the kind of the wounded warrior type of thing. And I really appreciate that. I think our guys are going to love this episode, especially. What I've always appreciated about you is you came on the podcast several years ago, and afterwards you said, "Hey Jim, why don't you come out here for free and go to one of my conferences, my retreats?" I thought, he just invited me out for a whole weekend free. This guy is about God's kingdom and not God's
Mm,
budget and God's
mm.
checkbook, and not him getting on top, you getting on top. So I've always remembered that, man. I appreciate it.
That is, yeah,
You bring something to the table that I think we're trying to bring as well, and that's we're all on the same team here.
yeah,
And so I
yeah.
appreciate you. So let's talk about your book, King Me. So the book
Okay.
threw me off a little bit at first, and then I saw the checker on the cover, and I was like, oh, okay, because I didn't have the book, and I saw that, I go, okay, I'm getting this.
Yeah,
I'm getting this. So tell us a little
yeah,
bit about the title of your book, King Me, and why you came up with that name.
yeah. So you've written several books, and it's interesting to an author or an artist. Um, if you follow U2 as a band, they're writing and singing different things now. Springsteen is a great example. I mean, here he is in the elder sage stage of his life, and he's writing different songs. Does that make sense? So, so this is true for me with King Me. There's an evolution, right, to all of us in our journey. There should be. Sanctification says that, that we're overcoming and becoming. And so for me, King Me was an opportunity to express a few things. One, about Jesus being the King of Kings. Two, part two of the book is very much about this journey that we're on. Jim, at 58, at 59, we've got more that we're looking back at than we're necessarily looking forward to. If you measure by years, mileage. And so, but what's happened to us along the journey is just critical to understanding who we are now, where we're headed, and what God might have for us. And so, those were just things that I had been experiencing more. I had, as a as a as a person in the counseling lane in some ways, even though I don't typically do that as much anymore. I'd rather be in a circle of 12 guys than one guy. But I'll dive off the boat to go get that one guy if that's where God's deploying me in that moment. But at the same time, yeah, when I think about my getting counseling, my receiving counseling, my sitting across from a good guide who can, yeah, take me into my story and take me into my journey and ask some of the questions. That's King Me came from some of that part of my journey over the last 5 to 7 years. And one of the real threads in the book has much to do with how you and I and men are made as image bearers, masculine image bearers, and our need for validation and initiation on the journey. And you validate a 7-year-old and you initiate an 8-year-old different than a 57 or 58-year-old. And what does that look like? And so if the Father is fathering us, right? If Jesus is equipping us with power and authority to move as we progress in the journey, moving to this king stage, and if the Holy Spirit, right, is guiding us and counseling us, so the Trinity's involved, I started to see how Do you remember that book? The Prayer of Jabez.
Of course. I read it 5
Okay.
times.
Okay. Could you just give a what pop quiz, Jim? What was that really about? What was that book
Oh
about?
gosh, First Chronicles 4, 9, and 10, and it was about asking.
That number
It
one,
was
that's
about
so impressive because we did not talk about this
no, no,
before.
no. But
You,
I prayed this prayer many times, but it talks about basically God. It's a prayer asking God to protect our hearts and enlarge our capacity, and through enlarging our capacity, increasing our territory. There's my high
there
level
you
pop
go.
quiz. Did I
Beautiful.
pass?
You did. I'm going to use this. I'm going to cut this little excerpt out and post it everywhere that we have a presence
I
because
appreciate
yes.
it.
And so let me ask you another question. How many books do you think Wilkerson sold?
Oh, I bet he was in the 4 million there, and that
It
little
was
dinky
millions.
books.
Yep.
Yeah, little
Yep.
dinky book, he
Little book.
millions. Yeah.
So that tells us that, in my opinion, tells us subjectively that that little book hit a chord, just like Eldridge's Wild at Heart we were talking about. It hit a chord with men, Jim, because I believe there's a chord in men that can be hit.
Well, it's interesting, Michael. In your book, you actually said this. So I'm quoting you now, so I don't have to, it's not a
Okay.
pop quiz. You said this on page 47. As an image bearer, you reflect the likeness of the hero of this larger story, and he has written you into a vital role. You are to play a part alongside him and with him. And that's critical for guys to get this.
Yeah. Yeah. And so writing the book had a lot to do with my journey in those spaces and realizing that I'm not just hanging on until Jesus comes back. He's actually empowering and trusting. I say in the book, cutting keys. He gave them to his friends, his disciples, and then we see the book of Acts. He has keys for us. And what does that look like in the kingdom if we can walk into spaces kindly and strongly, but with power and authority, and bring that goodness to the world that around us, back to Jabez, so that he could expand our territory if he could trust us with more territory. And so that made sense to me logically, and I think theologically that, if you're not going to be tested beyond what you're able, and if you've been faithful with a little, you're going to get more. There's some condition in this. His love is unconditional, but I was discovering more and more that there are some conditions in which this relationship with God, with the Father, and what he wants to, where he wants to put me, how he wants to not use me, because I think we get a lot of that theology, but how he wants to partner with me in spaces, how he wants to empower me in opportunities. And so those were things that were just driving the experience. And then, how if you've written a book or two, or as many as you've written, the research became so fun. I started discovering more and more and more how true this is.
Well, it's interesting. You brought up a quote, and you quote Oswald Chambers in your book several times. And one of my favorite quotes I read in his book, My Utmost for His Highest, he said, God is not interested with you working for him. He wants you to work with him. And the beautiful thing, and as I get older, when I was younger, and I've been in full-time ministry 35 years. When I was younger, I really wanted to be the hero. Like, I want to come in, rescue, and overwork, and I was the Messiah complex. And as I get older, I'm realizing, no, I want to be the guide. And so when you say that, I just concur. Maybe that's an older guy thing, but guiding these younger guys on this journey to increase their capacity for God and for God to increase their territory, and then we get to celebrate not as us being the hero in their story, but them being the hero in this grand kingdom drama that God has entrusted to them. He's given them that key, and He's only cut one key, and they're holding it, for them. So, well, let's do this. Let's break down the book. Let's do a 30,000-foot view of the book. You have 4 sections in your book. So can you explain each one, and then just why, the each section and what they mean?
Yeah, great question. The part 1 is about the King of Kings, and the passage in Revelation that he's the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. So capital K, King, belongs to Jesus. We get that. But back to the cutting keys, he no longer calls us servants. He calls us friends. and he's entrusting the ways of the kingdom, how it works, who you are in it, but all of it, vine and branches, right? That when the disciples come back from the scrimmage where they have been entrusted with power and authority, and they go and heal people, they do what Jesus did, right? They come back and Jesus says, I know, it's so cool. This is going to work. But even better, even more cool is that your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. So there's a position that we have as Christ followers, but also as image bearers. So there's discipleship is learning how to become like him. And Romans 8 is very clear. He becomes like us, sinful man, so that we can become like him. The word there is glorious ones. So not just sinners saved by grace, but I think, Jim, the gospel that I want to champion has a lot more to do with sonship and brotherhood and empowering and the opportunity to, yes, somehow, some way, bring goodness to a world that so needs Christians who, and I get it. There's political spaces and there's plenty of injustices and things to go after, but love and kindness and strength, what would that look like as a masculine image bearer? And can I, instead of, put my stake in the ground, this is what's true and this is the way it's got to be, to really understand the very person that I'm talking with, or might very well have a different position, but I don't even know their story, and I'm trying to run over them with theology rather than run to them with some care and attention. So understanding who Jesus is my point in part one. And I think, and I don't know, I haven't asked you this, but what's your take on The Chosen and the Jesus that's portrayed in The Chosen?
Well, okay, I'm going to give you my answer here, and I hope it's not the wrong one, but I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm in love with that series. I've had those guys on my podcast. I mean, I'm really frustrated that they moved away from Angel and they're doing a thing in the theater, because I've been dying for season 4. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, their portrayal of Jesus is rocking my world. I've watched every episode 3 times.
Yeah.
And I'm crying every episode. I mean, so there's my answer. I hope that's right.
So there it is. So I think it's right, because I think everybody I ask that, all the men that I ask that, is the same response.
Yeah.
I would love to hang out with that guy.
Oh, all day long.
I want to be with you. And we see how Jesus is not only kind, he's provocative. He can get a little snarky, right?
Get used to different.
Yes, to different, right? And he's funny. So my point is, if we don't have an image of Jesus that we want to be like, then something's not right.
Absolutely.
And the subtlety of that's happened in our Christianity, I think, is hurting us in the men's movement, because we could talk about this part one, but having Jesus right is really critical to me getting well, and me becoming the superhero that I wanted to become, the man that can make a difference, the man that contribute, and the man that has something to offer. So that's part one.
So it's interesting, Michael, along that line. Last night I do a service for men, and I run a table with young men that play football at Linfield University. So I have this table of young guys because I'm their chaplain. And one of the guys, he's going to go to Europe next week and play in the European Pro League. Great receiver. And he said, man, I've just kind of recommitted my life to Christ 6 months ago. And he said, the thing holding me back is I just hope God will forgive me for my past. And I went, whoa. I go, that's not the God I worship, bro. Let me give you a theology lesson here. And here it is. You're already forgiven.
Yeah.
Romans 8:1 says there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. When you come to God with your guilt and shame and tell him how bad you are, he goes, I don't even know what you're talking about, because all he sees is Jesus, who said, though your sins are red as scarlet, behold, they're white as snow. So his eyes opened up and you could see the freedom in his eyes. He's like, oh, I don't have to live there? No, bro, no. We ask for forgiveness, but it's not about receiving forgiveness. It's about receiving our role in our sin to make the relationship with Jesus right. It has nothing to do with him forgiving us. So I think that's so important. We have to get God right. If we don't get him right, we're in trouble. So your next section is called The Journey of a King. Talk to me about that one.
Yeah. So Gordon Dalby,
Oh,
Dr. Hicks, John Eldridge, these guys wrote about the masculine journey. Think of developmental psychology, adolescence, puberty, and just this linear line that is a journey, mile markers. And so looking at every stage that I wrote about, and I give credit to all those guys for shaping and contributing and being, faculty members, if you will, for my heart on the masculine journey. And so boyhood and the explorer stage, and then the warrior stage, the lover stage that transcends all the stages, because we're first made to receive love, but then we grow up and begin to offer love, and then the king stage and the elder stage. So these stages, they have a linear, Jim, there's, when you're 10, you're on the cusp of moving from boyhood to explorer. So about every decade you
okay. I
could,
was going to ask that because you didn't have a chronology listed, and I was like, okay, so where are we in the king stage? We're not in the elder stage. We're in
yeah,
the king
we're in the
stage.
king stage.
Okay.
Hmm.
Is
Yeah.
hold on.
Kings.
Is my
Yep.
60 the elder stage, Michael?
No,
I'm
I'm
just
pushing it.
I'm just
I'm pushing
teasing.
it out there. I'm
I'm
going to
just
push it out there to 68.
I'm just teasing. Keep it out there, baby. Keep it out there.
Yeah. So, yeah, the stages, there's some
Every 10.
gray for
For
sure
sure.
in those transitions because, man, some boys, when their dads left or
Oh
there was
yeah.
some tragedy, they were thrust into a man of the house, which is very unkind for a 9 or 11-year-old boy.
It's tragic.
His mom made him a lover. Now you need to be here for mom
Figuratively, yes.
and provide as a king would for her emotionally. And I don't know whose story I'm touching on there. I'm just saying that we talk about these stages as, give or take a decade, they overlap a little bit. And so as you move into the warrior stage, each stage has some questions that your heart is asking, and actually those questions go with you. So we talked before. I'm 59, going to be 60 this year. But the boyhood questions, as a boy is moving about the planet, he's asking just a few core questions. His heart is asking, do you see me? Do you love what you see? Do you want to be with me? He's not really worried about strength yet. He just wants to know what you see and do you want to be with? So where does that go, Jim, in you at 58?
Oh,
Is that, have you graduated? Are you
I
done with
agree
that?
with you 100% on this. And with the boys, this is why it's so important in the boyhood stage.
Yeah.
He's saying, "Do you see me? Do you love me? Do you want to be with me?" That's why it's so important for men. Forgive this phrase; it's my little weird phrase, to show up so much in their kids' lives they become boring. That they're shocked if dad doesn't show up, because that's
Hmm.
where they're initiated. Like you wrote in your book on page 102 about boyhood, you said it's important for a boy to be introduced to other men, to see being men in the company of other men, observing them, and being introduced to dad's friends, learning a handshake, and the importance of looking someone in the eye, and how to honor others with good manners. This is how this boy grows up. So when a
Yeah.
boy is thrust into manhood in this boyhood phase, really in a lot of ways he's hamstrung because Gordon Dalby said only men in his book, a great book. He said only men can impute manhood
Yeah.
on a boy. So the moms, as much as they try, they can't do it.
Yeah.
And we have
Yeah.
50. You know what? We have 50% of our audience is women. We just found this out about 2 weeks ago, and I was shocked by that. And I think
Mm.
it's because we have so many women who are raising boys and
Yeah.
trying to figure it out. And I applaud
Yeah.
those women.
Yeah.
But what a tragedy to have a boy grown up without somebody telling him, yes, I want to see you. Yes, I love what I see. Yes, I want to be with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Shameless plug for the book.
Yeah.
If you're a mother of boys, and if he's even 25 or 30, right? And you've been a single mom, man, props to you. Incredibly difficult job, but I think King Me's the kind of book that you want if you find yourself in that situation, because it describes the masculine journey, the questions that the masculine heart is asking. Because the masculine heart, even if he's 8 years old, it's still a masculine heart, and the progression of how does that look, in terms of answering those questions. And yes, a mother offers an image bearing source of love and care and nurture and strength as well. But to your point, I think Gordon Dalby's right, Eldridge, there's a bestowing of masculinity, and you have to be in the company of men. So even a single mom, if she was really intentional about this at church, at you, who could she sign treaties with and contracts? Who would not babysit, right? But who could she get her young cub in the presence of, so that handshakes, looking in the eye, manners. Yeah, it's a tough order, right? Because there's just not even men aren't actively engaged so much in this process, that like you said, that their kids are bored because dad's just showing up. So you move from that stage into the explorer stage, and you remember when you were 10, 9, 11, all of a sudden mobility, you start a bike, you're moving, you're now meeting kids, and you're starting to move into places I call the jungles of junior high, middle school, and high school. It's freaking jungles, right? You're bouncing into kids that have all kinds of backstories and parental challenges and medications. Nothing wrong with medication, but you are in a jungle of an environment. Teachers that are just trying to keep it together, have order in their classroom. And you might be privileged enough to meet a teacher or somebody in youth group who really is there to see you and encourage you and invite you, validate you, and initiate you on the next leg of the journey. The challenge on the masculine journey through these stages of part 2 is, if you don't get those questions answered, you're going to take them with you into the next stages.
That is so, and here's why. So Eldridge in his book talked about the explorer questions, but he made it a general question that men ask 2 questions. Do I have the strength? Do I have what it takes? But what I appreciate about you, and my favorite part of the book, in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 27, Paul says, I discipline my body and make it my slave. We often forget, guys, that God has called us to steward the bodies he gave us so that we'll be ready, healthy, and spiritually dangerous to fight the good fight, whether it's working at your job, serving your God, protecting your bride, or being a great dad to your kids. That's why we're so excited to partner with Mountain Tough Fitness Lab. Mountain Tough Fitness Lab is run by Christian men who are passionate about training you to be your best version and to stay dangerous and ready for God. Join me on my journey by going to mountaintough.com and getting your free 6-week trial when you type in the code ARENA30. You won't be disappointed. Stay dangerous. So Eldridge in his book talked about the explorer questions, but he made it a general question that men ask 2 questions. Do I have the strength? Do I have what it takes? But what I appreciate about you, and my favorite part of the book, is actually the 6 stages, because you not only nail them down chronologically, but you put questions in there. And I actually carried a couple of my questions over until 2017, when I experienced a God moment through another friend who challenged me, and it was life-giving to me. And so This is really important. So that explorer, that young boy saying, the 10 to 20-year-old saying, do I have the strength? Do I have what it takes? And if he doesn't get that answered, he's going to carry that into his 30s and 40s, and this is where we start seeing the problems.
Yeah, and that's a huge stage, the explorer stage. If you're not starting to get some responsibility, and I'm telling you that the in between the stages, man, there's some hell in there, right? Because you're a 7-year-old, 6-year-old, and it's your mom and dad doing things for you. Well, you start to come to the explorer stage. If they're still doing it for you, right? You need to learn how to cut your own meat, how to get your own breakfast. Not every day, but right, you have got to start learning to take care of yourself. Hygiene to money. If mom and dad are buying everything, then that heart is missing out on the opportunity to learn the value of money. And so how do you impart some of these initiating moments of, well, honey, I'm not going to buy that. I'll tell you what, I'll go half. And I talk about, it's amazing how many things went back on the rack
Oh yeah.
with my kids when we started doing halvesies, right? And they started babysitting, or they started mowing lawns, or they started, whatever they started to get a little. I was amazed at how they didn't want to part with their money, but they had no problem with asking me to part with mine. And so that's just one example of this stage, how to handle money, how to save, how to give, different things that can happen in the explore stage. And this is a stage, I think, that a lot of moms and dads, especially if there's younger kids, right? You trust, unfortunately, you trust that your oldest is doing fine as you focus on the ones you have to cut meat for or change diapers for. They're not doing fine. There's too much that the enemy has to throw at them through phones and technology, through how they fit in, how to not be ostracized or made fun of, and just the enemy has. It's a tough stage, explore stage, and then it lends itself to warrior stage, which the next stage is really about how do you protect yourself. And I'm not. Yes, do not get in a van with a guy who has some puppies. The say no to drugs, the just say no, the strangers programs that we had in the 70s growing up, right? But now, it's bigger than that. There's a spiritual reality that we start to bring into the warrior stage of how the world works. Films like The Matrix, films like Lord of the Rings, films like Narnia, all of those things are very helpful to help a younger heart begin to understand that the world isn't safe, it's fallen, that Jesus is coming back, but right now there's a prince of this dark world. How does all this work? And that every thought's not your own. Shame, guilt, fear, they have agents that are at work, maybe not creating some of the crap that happens, but they'll capitalize on it every day. So your friend who thought your wide receiver, he projected on God that right? God must, I hope he won't remember my past.
Yeah, he's going to hold it. Well, there's a dichotomy to this stage. And the dichotomy is in the questions these guys are asking. They're asking, how do I discern between good and evil?
Good and evil.
But on the flip side of that, they're saying, in this dangerous world, how do I offer my strength for good? So those two are questions that they're dichotomous, but they have to operate simultaneously, or at least together.
And to your point about that last thing, if your strength is not already in place, you're probably in trouble. If you don't have belovedness, if it's not being bestowed already, it doesn't mean you can't catch up. It doesn't mean that there can't be intervention. But what we're talking about is very, very challenging, because that foundation. So here we're talking about linear. And then you remember in the book, I did another diagram of boyhood and belovedness as the foundation, then explorer, then warrior, right? Then king. So as if there's inferior workmanship down here and you're 50, you've got to get some reconstruction in there. You've got to get some kind of attention to those questions that were asked along the way. So I think the warrior stage, you just don't, by the time you're in your 20s, you do not want to be naive. You do not want to be ignorant of the spiritual realm, how it works, how foul spirits work, how the kingdom of darkness is still, it's still here. And what are they doing? What do they have on you? What's their game film look like when they break huddle or break the locker room or step out of the foxholes? I don't even know if they get in foxholes. I think they just have the ability.
Well, I'll tell you what, there is a game plan for each man. I guarantee you.
Absolutely.
Well, it's really interesting. Like 62% of our listeners are in the warrior stage. And I think what's going on here, and this is also you wrote about this in your book, The Heart of a Warrior. In this warrior stage, if we are not oriented, like if we didn't have our questions answered in the previous two stages, we have to get around, or you called them oriented men, men who have answered these two questions. Who am I and why am I here? That's an oriented man, right?
Yeah.
and we have to get around them. And so that's why
Yeah.
Zoe, Men in the Arena, and some of these organizations are attracting this younger generation, these guys who are in their warrior phase going, I need to get around some oriented guys.
Yeah.
So
And so how it works is a critical part of, physical training. There's a spiritual training. If Proverbs 4:23 is important above all else, guard your heart. So you guard your heart against the enemy, and yet we're supposed to be open-hearted towards God and his love and experiencing it and receiving it. So these are huge. And I know I know too much from experience for me. That is, those questions that we're talking about, Jim, they don't go away. You take them to the world. You take them to work. You take them to women. You take them to athletics. You take them to sales. You take them to church. So your wide receivers, projecting on God, a place that he's lived for years, that somebody's applause is based on my performance. And that economy is not really, it's not true in the kingdom, but that's how inundating that can be to an 18, 19, 22-year-old who is living, as Larry Crabb put it, living outside the garden. And life outside the garden is warfare, is hard. And there's reasons why Jesus and his friends just say, hey, take heart, have courage, be careful, watch out. It's all over the New Testament. And I think we've just, we've missed. I don't know if we just thought Jesus, put the bad guys to rest. And, it's just us not being able to measure up and get our crap together and stop sinning. Sinning is way downstream. It's way downstream. These questions are way upstream.
Well, what we've done is we are great capitalist Christians. In other words, we operate under our American economy and not God's economy. And so we have to overcome that. And that's hard for, a lot of guys. Well, let's talk about the third phase. So the glory of a king. This is a cool phase, man. I like this. Talk about the glory of a king.
So in recovery and in rehab, right? You're trying to get something that's lost or something that should be that isn't. And so when you think about it being an image bearer, you carry in you the glory of God. Small g, right? Think about the batteries. I mean, he's going to empower you to live this life that he's promised you, victorious, overcoming. And so the glory of a king is the unique way that Jim Ramos bears God's image. And so all the attacks of the enemy through your boyhood and warrior has been to prevent you from living free in Christ, with Christ, through Christ, from Christ. So that's why I love what you brought up, the oriented man, because the oriented man's a man who is experiencing from God who he is. So whose opinion matters most about you? And I'm back to your wide receiver. Your wide receiver thought God's opinion about him was, I don't know if I can. But if you really, and we can memorize these passages, we can talk about them on many more podcasts about being a beloved son, being an image bearer. But if you experience the love of God, if he actually shows you and tells you that you are his beloved son and that he's got some nicknames for you, Jim, he knows your formal names, but he knows how you're known in heaven. He knows how he has some fond, Jim the hunter. Jim's my hunter. No. I'm not talking about deer on his walls. I'm talking about he hunts down men who are hurting trouble. You know what I mean?
Oh, so well, Jesus did that. Sons of Thunder, The Rock. I mean, right. Jesus. Those that's things. That's what he does. He
so
knows
naming you and the power of that, the significance of having a identity that is connected with Trinity DNA, connected to him. And so we see Jesus has all these names. His friends, he gives some of these names and titles. So that's what I mean by validation. and initiation. I use a story. Do you remember Fury, the movie Fury?
Oh, of course.
So, here's these war names,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, Machine.
Yeah, they
That's
got
your,
the
that's
they
your
you
warning.
got the new name.
Machine. Yeah. And so, yeah, out of that place, there's just there's so much goodness in the kingdom as kingdom citizens, privileges and responsibilities, right? And so the glory of a king is how you uniquely bear his image. And if you are living under lies about yourself or about God, then that's in the way of your glory and you being able to offer that. We talk about false self, true self quite a bit in King Me. And man, most Christian dudes are they're false self dominant. Doesn't mean they're not Christians, but the enemy just has a couple good plays that they run on them. A couple places that they just can poke, and that guy blows up or just recoils. Either aggression or coward, passive, right, and hiding. I sinned. I'm ashamed. I hide, or I make jokes. I make light of it. What is these ways that we've all learned to cope, and that's where Kimi, I think, is inviting its readers to. Why do you do that?
It's
Nothing wrong with
interesting.
nothing wrong with being funny, except when it's not funny.
Yeah. Is
Or
that is that
so. Go
is
ahead.
that your cover? Yeah. Well, at the end of the
Your
Lord's prayer,
cover, good one.
Jesus said, taught us, "For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever, amen." And I love that prayer because this is when I think of the glory of the King, I think of that prayer where I say, God, everything I do, make it for your glory. I want your rule and reign in my heart, and everything I do is for your glory. And because I want your kingdom in my life, and I want your kingdom in my life. I want your rule and reign in my heart. God, I'm asking you to put me on display through an empowerment. Give me the power to build your kingdom that's already building in me. And God, when you put me on display, I will give you the glory. When I think of glory, I think of, God wants to put us on display. But when Adam and Eve sinned, the first thing they did was cover up. Well, before they were walking upright with no shame. You know what I mean? No shame. And so God wants to, bring healing to the masculine soul so this man can walk upright and on full display, not for his glory, but for the glory of the true king, which is your first part of the book.
And they're so connected.
Yes.
It's I think it was purpose driven life that starts. It's not about you.
Yep,
And
exactly.
I quote that in King Me. And I couldn't even write it the way I wanted to write it. I had to use some different ways to italicize or bold, but it's all about you.
See,
It's all about
I've
you.
never really I like his quote, but I've always thought that's kind of half baked.
A little
And so I'm
diminishing.
I'm kind of glad that you did that because I was thought, okay, good for you, Mike. I'm glad that you're the one who he's going to call, not me. But I
Well,
thought,
he sold 40 million copies,
yeah,
so
he's good to go.
but apparently we like that. We like that little, chest poke and degrading
Yeah,
and put in our place. But I'm saying, no. This is more C.S. Lewis's theology.
yeah.
No. You are glorious. You bear his image, and this idea that it is about you. You were worth. You're not worthless. You were worth what you were paid for.
Yeah, Jesus is the capital H hero in the grand kingdom drama, but every man is the hero in his story. And
Yeah,
he needs to step up to that plate and say, God's putting me on display. He's
right.
put a mantle upon me, and I'm going to walk in that without shame.
Yeah. Hey man, this is gonna I hope I don't get your audience all riled up, but
I hope you do.
this idea, right, that it's not about you, it is about you. This this is another idea that you're not in the way, bro. You are the way. He didn't he resides in you. It's you in him and him in you. That's the deal. And so you're not in the way. You are the way that he wants to transform the world, that he wants to bring you the kingdom, that he wants to entrust you with more. And it's not your underachieving that he's so concerned about. It's you're not believing him when he tells you who you are.
And in doing so, we're not believing in him. If I'm not going to if I'm not going to believe that the God who made me has the best intentions for me,
Yeah.
what I'm really saying is, God, I don't believe that who you say you are in the Bible. I'm not buying that.
Yeah.
I'm not believing that who you are in the Bible is true, because that can't be true for me.
Yeah.
And
So I'm going to
yeah.
put you on the spot. This is a question that's just coming up. I think the Spirit's coming up on me
All
to
right,
just
hit
so
me, baby, hit me. Come
I,
on.
so again, we get relegated sometimes to, and I love the Bible. There are so many biblical references in King Me. Just let me go on
Oh,
record.
tons.
But have you met with God, had church, experienced God outside of church, outside of the scriptures, Jim? Have you heard his voice? Has he ever told you what he thinks about you, how he feels towards you?
Oh, well, every morning I come into the office. First thing I do is I grab my note paper and I pray and I fill up. This is this morning, and I fill it up with stuff. And it's
Yeah.
just random. Some stuff's random, some stuff's personal, but it's just allowing
Yeah.
God to saturate me. Because here's the deal. I believe the Bible. I mean, I'm passionate about the Bible, but here's the deal. The Holy Spirit is with me and is in me. And I'm more passionate about the
Yeah.
relationship with God. So I need to have God filtering his
Yeah.
message into me. I don't know how guys survive on their own without, and maybe in that way I'm weak. I need to have God speaking to me. That's what
Yeah.
he's
Or
made me.
just the Bible.
Yeah.
Or just the Bible.
Or
You
yeah,
know,
well, I mean, that's one way he speaks, but there's
no
so many
doubt.
other ways that he speaks. And if
Yeah.
we don't, I mean, I just went to have breakfast with myself this morning because I just needed to sit quietly and listen. And if a man can get away and just shut his mouth, people. Here's the problem, Michael. When I talk to people, I say, "What is prayer?" And they always say, "Talking to God." And I go, "That's really not true.
Mm,
That's half break. Prayer is turning to
yeah.
God. Turn to Him and just listen to Him." Again, American mindset, right?
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
answer
I
your
love it.
question, I love hearing.
Asking him questions, considering it. I mean, I, I had to hit that pretty good in King Me, that it's not just the Bible. And I found out in inviting God to speak to me, I had an encounter with him that I write about, where the next thought I had, right? The next thought through my thoughts, the next thought I had was, "You don't believe that I do." Because I was asking him to speak to me, and he said, "Well, you don't believe that I do." And I knew exactly where he wanted to go, because I had made some agreements. I had signed some contracts in my youth that I wasn't good enough, just like your wide receiver. I hope he's not mad at me. If he's not. But if you believe that, then that's going to have power in your life. So all of this inventory that a man could do, it's not thousands of files, but there's a few good files that the enemy has on you, like you said earlier. And they're going to work them as covertly as they possibly can. And you wonder why you're in the ditch again with her, or with your kids, or with work, and you're not going upstream, far enough to really see what is at work here. When somebody gives you their opinion, you feel so deeply criticized. And then you either run and medicate, or you run over and collateral damage. What is it that makes you so angry? And that's a question every man can answer, because I think it's a question every man deals with. Because anger is just it's this invitation to intimacy with God, but few of us ever go to that ball. Few of us ever take that appointment. And what would that look like? And what glory might he want to be revealing to you that you're not getting because you won't come to him for it? And you could look it up in a verse, but I'm not talking about that. This is not in a Bible study. This is in a walk, in a journey, in an intimacy with the Trinity. And so that's where the glory of a king, really, that part of that book of the book is about.
Well, isn't that interesting, Michael? I mean, men are drawn to the nature. They're drawn to sunsets. They're drawn to mountains. They're drawn to just the deep of the ocean, because that's where we as men recognize we don't even know what it is. It's the glory of God.
Yeah.
And so we are deep waters. And so I think this is a great chapter. Appreciate our section. The last section, I really appreciate this section. It caught me off guard, to be honest with you. But it's the reign of a king. And you got a little practical here, and
Yeah.
I thought, wow, okay, this is this little bit change on the end here. And you said that this means fighting for. This is I don't know what the page number is. 26. I don't know. It's in the 200s, 255, 260. This means fighting for and cultivating the two most important relationships in the life of a good king, the queen and the heirs to the throne. So let's talk about this with our last 10
Yeah.
minutes here. Let's talk about the reign of a king.
Yeah. Yeah. What she needs, and even if she's your ex, and the mother of your children, right? What she needs is an oriented king. What she needs is a king who's overcoming and becoming more of his true self. What they need is a man, is a father who understands the masculine, and it's not that hard to translate this book into the feminine journey, understands the masculine and feminine, and understands that what you may not have got from your dad, it can be different. And what you might have gotten from your mom or dad, you can get free from. So depending on which way that has to go, and to understand that your children are in the same story you're in. They're outside the garden too. The enemy is coming. He's coming for them. And there's no JV Holy Spirit. There's no youth Jesus. I mean, I get it that we need to give them appropriate measures of this, but who is training, our kids in the ways of the kingdom? And if you're leaving it up to the church, Dad, come on, man. It's not a coward way. It could be an ignorant way, but it's just a passive way. And so the engaging opportunity to talk to your children about how the kingdom works, who they are in it, use some of the parables and stories and illustrations. Man, I don't care if you use Harry Potter or you use Narnia, but find out what they love. Find out why they're upset. And the biggest thing I put in those two chapters about the queen and the children, heirs to the throne, even if they're adult children, even if your kids are 30 or 40, I think as a good king, we need to learn that we didn't like when people told us what to think or feel. Let's not tell them what to think or feel. Let's be diligent at observing and trying to understand why they think and feel the way they do.
Well, you have a real powerful quote in this section on page 260. I want to read it because I think that we dads have been deceived into thinking that we just provide tangible things for our family, and it's not true. You said this: fatherhood is an exploration of the heart whose discoveries over time build trust, wonder, and blessing. But in exploration, there is always danger. Now, this is critical. The things we build are fragile, talking about the heart of our children and our wife.
Children. Mm-hmm.
And accidents or sabotage can occur in seconds. So this thing that we're providing for, you don't have to have tons of money. Your
Right.
kids really don't want that. They want something intangible. Walk us through it.
Yeah, they want your presence and they want your words.
And those are cheap.
Even
I mean, those don't cost you a lot of money.
and yet they're such rich investments.
Yes.
And you mentioned blessing. I have my dad's still alive. My mom's passed, but I have a few incredible memories, and I hope there's a few more of my dad validating me and blessing me and speaking words of life over me. Now, one was in a pheasant field in South Dakota on a pheasant hunt. He was an upland hunter and loved it. We kind of reclaimed that about 20 years ago and went for several years, once a year, and then some health things and different things. But I had a bunch of guys, a lot of fathers and sons, Jim, and I was a son at 40 something. I'm 59 now, so 45 years old, and I created these kind of validation scripts, validation ceremonies. And I told the dads that were on this trip, hey, here, you got a couple days, you need to read through this because we're going to have this, sundown ceremony, dances with wolves backdrop, in South Dakota. And and it was so holy you almost couldn't watch it. And there was one after the other ceremonies. They weren't long, and they didn't need to be long, but they were introduce your son to the circle, right? Like introduce him to the circle, and then put your hand on his shoulders and look him in the eye. Forget that we're all here. What do you love about him? What what is it that you're proud of? Those two things. And give one example of how you've seen those things happen in his life. I remember the time, and finish the blank. I mean, you talk about a bunch of guys in orange and khaki and shotguns up against some hay bales, and we're just going, oh, I mean, our sleeves are just getting snotted because every one of us was impacted by that kind of love that validates, that bestows. And so how do you bless your children? What words and what presence are you given? Are you able to give them? And some of us, it wasn't given to us. So we're pioneering in this space. But if it's given to you by God, if you're turning to God for that, then you do have something to offer. And I think there's things in this book, and there's others, rites of passage. This is something that we're going to have to bring back to recover generational masculinity.
Yeah, we're doing that now. That's so critical. I was writing them down as you wrote, because we have a rite of passage ceremony, and I wrote down hands on shoulder. I always have the guys get behind their kids and introduce them. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to have them do that and then get in front of them and do what you're saying, because that
eye to eye.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Absolutely. That's so powerful. And I read that in your book, The Pheasant Hunt. It's so powerful. So, okay, so you've put me on the quiz twice. So I'm going to give you a quiz once. So I feel like, right, we're not ledger people here, but we are guys. So here we go, man. So first of all, how can these guys grab a hold of your book? What's the best way?
They can go to our website, ZOWEH.org. And there'll be a link that they can kind of get into the Outpost and get a book. And then, man, you post yours there. The world of Amazon. Go to Amazon, King Me. You never know what might show up. There might be a romance novel called King Me, but move through that, and the checker piece. And I go back to, I didn't really hit on that, but checkers. I mean, advancing, moving across the board. And then becoming something else, moving differently. That's the journey. And so that's why the checker piece is on the cover of King Me. That parable, illustration, metaphor just really worked for me. And I found it to be an encouragement, because everybody can identify. You start playing when you're young. It's the rainy day game.
Well, most covers are lame. That was a great cover. I love that cover. I'm like, heck yes on that cover, man. It was just, I love a cover that tells a story, and you get the title and it just tells a story. So here's my pop quiz for you. So we like to end each podcast with what we call boots on the ground. We want guys to be able to apply what they've learned. So, I'm going to ask these guys to go somewhere and turn to God in a moment of silence, and not ask, and not pray in elaborate prayers. I just want them to bring up something to write with, probably not their phone. It's too distracting. And I want them to ask God 2 questions. Whatever the questions are you want them to ask. So that's the quiz part.
Yeah.
What are the 2 questions you want these guys to ask in a moment of?
We do these questions. I'm going to do a couple from our weekends, which, by the way, there's another one coming in April, and your ticket's still good. So if you want to punch your ticket,
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm going to do that, dude. I'm going to do it.
We've got a bunch of guys from Portland coming. I don't know if you know that.
I need to get out there for my own soul, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really great ticket then. We'll just let you come incognito. But a couple questions. God, how do you see me? How do you see me? And sit in that a bit. Now you may, I don't know what he's going to do.
Yeah, I've done this before. Yes.
You may have some image like I did. I wrote about in Heart of a Warrior of Aragorn, and I thought I was doing the exercise wrong. I really did. I thought, okay, come on, Thompson. Get it together. God, how do you see me? So then the second question that I think is powerful is, God, would you show me how I see me?
In that, so you want him to ask it in that order.
I think asking him how he sees me, you know, is that's what should matter most. And then hopefully that can shadow, yeah. And I've seen I've viewed myself as underachieving, a disappointment. I remember one guy saying, yeah, when I asked that, I saw this picture of a mule. God, what's that about? Just load him up. I saw another guy talk about, he saw himself like Radar O'Reilly, could get stuff for everybody. Oh yeah, man, I've heard some wild stories, some beautiful stories, tears, but I think that it's, I've seen, he's taken me back to boyhood and shown me, images of, just pictures, that have captured me. That once I heard about, my boyhood, it's funny then what he can bring across my eyes, and I can see, and I have eyes to see boys playing in a sprinkler. One not long after I was talking with God about my boyhood, he showed me this. I just got this picture of a boy on a high dive who wouldn't jump, and took me into, there's some first times can be scary. First times can be hard, but you did it, and you keep doing it. The board gets higher, Michael, and you keep going out there with me. I love that about you. So I don't know what he's going to do for our friends. And I would say, brothers, this is not, we're not testing God. If you don't feel like you get much, don't let discouragement come slither in. Don't let, diminishment come in. Stay with the question. Give God some time to answer it, to show you. You'll know.
Yep.
If you stay with it,
yep,
you'll know.
And I think write it down. And
Yeah,
guys
yeah.
are like, well, how do I know what's God? Just write down the first thing that comes to your head. Just start writing stuff down. You will be shocked at what happens.
And I think it's very much within his way he'll reinforce it. It won't be a one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Like I said, he'll bring, he'll bring some wild ways to affirm that, no, you heard, you just don't believe. And I'll show you. Let me tell you, I'll show you that I mean it. And it may take 4 and 5 months for that to really solidify. And if it does, those 4 or 5 months, you will have a story to tell.
Oh yeah. Well, man, I'll tell you what, Michael, it's always great having you on. I appreciate your book, and hopefully these guys get their hands on a copy and slow digest that sucker. So thanks so much for coming on the show, man. It's always a great time having you here.
It's an honor, man. Love hanging out with you, and kingdom forward. Let's go.
All right, brother. Well, hey, we'll have to meet in the South Dakota prairies and shoot some pheasants.
I like it. Sounds great.
I feel a man trip coming. Validation trip.
Just call it. Yeah,
all right, brother. Have a great day.
You too. Blessings.
Man, we want to thank you for being a podcast listener who's helped us become Spotify's #1 podcast for Christian men. But if you have yet to subscribe to the Men in the Arena podcast, please do so now. God bless you. Until next time, feel the wet sand on the arena floor. Hear the deafening roar of the crowd. Taste the sweetness of victory. Smell the stench of battle. Get in the game. Get dirty. Grind it out. And be a man.